Hello and welcome to the Society with Fatma Shaheen at PTB World. According to UN Women statistics, less than 20% of landholders worldwide are women. Furthermore, if we see the global situation, we would also appreciate the fact that in 19 countries world over, women do not have equal ownership rights to immovable property. Having said that, when we do glance at our Pakistani society, we all understand and appreciate the very basic fact that not only our religion Islam, the Pakistani constitution, rather various national and provincial laws do give women that right not only to manage but also to dispose of their property in whatever way they may so feel comfortable with. But having said that, when we do talk about, the actual implementation of not only these Islamic principles, but also, of course, our laws and policies which do prevail in the country today, we do see, unfortunately, that there is this gap in the implementation. Why is that the case? This is something upon which we'll be shedding light today. Overall, we'll not only be talking about, women's property rights as they do exist in the Pakistani society, we'll also be talking about, the various social biases and, of course, the social hurdles which do exist, which actually prevent women from not only accessing property, but also in ways more than one owning it too. We'll be talking about this very rampant practice where women, in cases more than one, are actually deprived of the inheritance rights. We'll also be talking in this regard about not only the Islamic stance and, of course, the importance that Islam then does place on women not only to own but also, of course, to inherit property per se. We'll also be talking about the work of the Pakistani government in this regard too, that how has the government generically worked so as to facilitate women's property rights overall in the country. Last but not the least, we'll also be talking about this from the viewpoint of, of course, reforming and changing our societal attitudes and mindsets so as to better comply with the SDGs too. All of this today, that too with an extremely diverse and pertinent panel. Let me introduce you to my today's panel. My first panelist for today's show is Ms. Sam Ali Dada, who has been the former advisor to the Ministry of Human Rights and Women Empowerment. Assalamu alaikum ji and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. My second panelist for today's show is Ms. Uzma Chugtai, who has been the former district and session judge, alongside being the former regional head of Federal Ombudsman on harassment at workplace. Assalamu alaikum ji and welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. My third panelist for today's show is Ustaz Waqar Nawaz Sahab, who is an Islamic scholar. Assalamu alaikum sir and welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you for joining us. And via telephone line, we'll be joined by Ms. Maliha Zia. She's a legal expert and she's also a human rights activist. Assalamu alaikum ji and welcome to the show. Now, before we start the discussion on today's topic, let's have a look at this brief report.
In Islam, women's property rights are firmly protected. Islamic law grants women the right to own, inherit, and manage property independently. These rights are clearly outlined in the Quran Sharif, ensuring that women have equal opportunities to acquire and control assets. Constitutionally, many countries enshrine women's property rights, providing a legal framework to protect these rights. Laws are designed to ensure women can own, buy, and sell property without discrimination, promoting gender equality. Despite these protections, social and structural impediments persist, particularly in rural areas. Cultural norms and traditional practices often hinder women's access to property ownership and management. These barriers include patriarchal attitudes, lack of education, and economic dependence. To challenge these social norms, community awareness and education are crucial. Empowering women through education, providing legal support, and promoting gender-sensitive policies can help break down these barriers. Engaging with community leaders and encouraging dialogue on the importance of women's property rights are effective strategies. The media plays a vital role in sensitizing men and the broader society about the importance of granting women access to property. Through stories, campaigns, and discussions, media can highlight the benefits of gender equality in property rights, fostering a more inclusive and fair society. In conclusion, by leveraging Islamic teachings, constitutional protections, and media influence, we can work towards ensuring women's property rights are respected and upheld, paving the way for a more equitable future.
Welcome back from the report. Now to get the conversation started with you, madam, when we do talk about property rights, this is that one area which then needs to be viewed in view of the traditional gender roles as they do exist in our Pakistani society. So overall, we do come across this very notion, rather this misconception that it is only men who are very capable of dealing with property and property transactions. How do you as a women rights advocate would debunk that myth? Because a lot of times we see women in their own right, they are very accomplished, they have that right knowledge and the right skills to do the same too. Do you feel that here education campaigns are something that we need to focus upon, or do you feel that to debunk such myths at the end of the day we need to at a very core level financially empower women?
Thank you very much, Fatma. So I will start this thing with the concept that we need to understand first of all what feminism is.
Right.
Usually people are misinterpreting it, and because that doesn't mean that one is better than the another gender. The thing is about the equal opportunities. We are not talking about that the one gender is better than another gender. We're just talking about that the equal opportunities must be given to the both genders, and they should avail those chances for not only economically empowerment but also in the decision making.
Right.
When we talk about Pakistan specifically, the thing is that our religion is giving all the rights, and the legal things are also there, and our dear panelists, they will discuss more about it.
Right.
But the society norms, we need to change them.
Of course.
Because that is the thing which I think as a person, if a mother, being a mother of a son, I have to teach my kids how they have to treat with their girls. So this is the kind of a thing which is a continuous process.
Right. And madam, it's very rightly pointed by yourself that it's just not about mother teaching these values to their sons, it's also about women teaching these values and treating other women the way they would perhaps want to get treated, because a lot of these human rights violations, they are stemming not only from men but also from women. We also see women wronging women too.
You raised a very valid point, and we need to understand that thing and these things are doctrine in our mind, and from the generations to generations we think in our conception that these things are not to do by women and these things should be done by men. We need to cross those barriers in a sense where we can give them equal opportunities, we can give them that confidence, and that thing can come through media, through society norms, through the family structure, which our religion has already given us hundreds and hundreds years ago. So these things cannot be reformed by the legislation or by the force. They are there, they are actually there, and I think our religion is the complete picture that how the first women entrepreneurship came, what was the role of a geopolitical or the diplomacy the women can play, and how decision maker
it is
women
definitely
can
a very
be done.
pro-women religion by that yardstick, right madam? Your point is noted. I'll come to you, Miss Malia, and I would want you to add to this further from the viewpoint of being a lawyer in Pakistan. So we now do understand the fact that when we do talk about overall women having property ownership rights, we do understand the fact that they can have different types of property, be it movable, be it immovable. In this regard, we also understand the fact they have that entitlement to, of course, have inheritance, and then they are given bridal gifts, even dowry at the event of marriage too. But overall, when we do talk about this from a legalistic viewpoint, at a very basic level, could you please tell us that what kind of laws exist in Pakistan so as to actually protect women's property rights, regardless of the fact from which kind of property they may emanate from?
It is important to recognize and understand that when we talk about property that women own, there are many different kinds of ways that women get and attain property. There's property that they buy themselves of their own resources, of which they are sole owners. There is property that they inherit from blood relatives. There is property they get at the time of marriage in the form of haq meher or dower, or any bridal gifts that are given to her, or dowry that are gifts given to her by her own family. And then there are gifts that can be given to her during her lifetime, whether, for example, from her husband or in-laws or parents or anyone else really who wishes to give her a gift of any sort. Now, property can be movable, meaning anything which is not attached to the earth. It could include things such as cars, machineries of any sort, stocks and bonds. Or immovable, things which are attached to the ground, like houses or lands or even factories, for example. Now, all of these types of property are protected under the Constitution of Pakistan and various laws of the land across the provinces. You have laws which protect the right of ownership, of transferring property, of use of that property and of use of anything coming out of that property, for example, rent money or any of the earnings that she has made as a result. And we also have property laws which protect the processes and make it easier for women to access it. And lastly, you have grievance redressal mechanisms whereby in 3 of the provinces and in Islamabad, there are special ombudspersons who are appointed for any dispute resolution on these properties.
And that's very rightly put by yourself, Ms. Malia, because we do also appreciate the fact that the Ombudsperson office has been given these powers recently, on which I would want you to comment on this further, because we do understand the fact that you have been the former regional head of Federal Ombudsman on harassment at workplace in Lahore. Having said that, when we do talk about the very powers and of course the domain of work of this very office, how do you see it changing over a period of time? Because initially we do understand the fact that they were just given the power to actually tackle women's harassment claims, but slowly and steadily the domain of these powers they increase so as to also resolve women's property disputes.
True. When you see the act which has been legislated recently in 2020, it says that the complaint must be filed to the Ombudsman, and it should be, there's one thing very important. The Ombudsman office can also take suo motu action on its own. If they get to know that there's something going wrong somewhere within the federal area, the federal ombudsman can interact.
And how often do you do just that? Because the common perception is that people would actually approach you and your office.
Yes, generally it is, because it's new, it's 2020 and it's 2024, so not much of it has been done, but the powers are there. And so it's a big power, I would really say so. Secondly, a complaint has to come here. It should not be, at that point of time initially, it should not be running in any civil court. However, if there is a suit being carried through proceedings in civil court, the federal ombudsman can interact and look into it in depth. Is there anything into it? Is there too much of evidence required? If not, the federal ombudsman can pass a kind of a decision that the civil court should stop here, and this is the rights and this is how it should be done.
Right.
But nevertheless, if it finds it's more intricate, more evidence is required, there can be lots of complications in property rights.
So it would be then fair to say cases which perhaps do not require very complex evidence, they would be the ideal fit for the office. But when we do talk about this, madam, also from a more of an amicable angle, because we do understand in courtrooms at least there is this adversarial kind of a environment and ambience. But when it comes to your office, do you not feel here perhaps women might be more comfortable approaching you as opposed to perhaps going to the court, because it would be more accessible, it would be more relatable, and I think the best thing is that they would be coming across a female who would be listening to them.
True, and the most important is the female would feel more confident that they don't have to go to the courts and for long hours wait, and that activity is not present in the Ombudsman office. So that is there quickly, in 60 days, the decision has to take place, and whatever the findings are coming, if it's too intricate, then the Ombudsman might send it to the civil court to go through it, but otherwise it will do. And very interestingly, no court has any authority to stay, pass interim injunction to any of the decisions of the Ombudsman.
Right, and these are things that people should know at the end of the day, especially prospective women litigants. Sir, I'll come to you and I would want you to add to this from the Islamic perspective. So when we do talk about a woman's right to inherit and also own property, we do understand the fact that Islam gave women that right way before it was there in the West, even for that matter. Women were in the pre-Islamic era treated as chattels merely, and they did not have that right to inherit. So how do you see this right being given to women, and how do you now see it evolve over a period of time? Because we have seen that somewhere the application of this right that has kind of changed in a socio-cultural context.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you, Ms. Fatima. As you yourself said, that Islam, in fact, 1400 years ago, emphasized very precisely like how the inheritance or how the rights of the woman should be dealt with, right? So and the example for that is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed in Surah An-Nisa, particularly verse number 11 and 12. The whole of Surah An-Nisa is dealing with the rights of the woman, the importance of the woman, and how those, they should be carried out and all that. So there is a lot of importance, and over the years, you see, the implementation and following the Islamic laws, right, has diminished.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately. And it's part of our history. Like we had ups and downs as well. So in that, when we're going down, like culturally we were destroyed as well, and also legally we were weakened as well. Some new laws were introduced as well. I'm not saying that new laws should not be introduced, but in Islam we're very clear about it.
Right.
If you make a law, it should be in the light of the Quran and the Sunnah.
As per the Pakistani constitution too. But sir, then you see, then again this goes back to the basics, and this is something which Ms. Sam very rightly so pointed out, that it has to do with the society at the end of the day. The religion itself is very clear, the laws themselves, they are also very clear. When it comes to the implementation of either the Islamic principles or our very laws, the issue is with our societal attitudes. And I do understand the fact that when we do talk about women, we must appreciate the fact vulnerable groups within this overall, general group of women too. We do see, for example, that widows, they might be more disadvantaged as compared to other women counterparts. So when it comes to upholding the rights of widows with regards to perhaps having better access to property, what particularly do you feel can be done in this regard?
Well, when we talk about specifically about widows and about their property rights and other things, even in general scenario, they feel a lot of problems because they feel insecure. And when the judgment is there, judgment in a sense of like if they are selling something, they are buying something, people are not taking them seriously.
Or even in cases of rent, Ms. Sam, we've seen a lot of times the tenants, they don't even pay them their rent, especially if the husband has passed away.
They will not pay them the right price, they will not pay them their basic, and there are huge and humongous pay gap in between men and female. And when we talk about widow, she is already insecure, she is already under the threat that if she is working, the society is looking at her with a different perspective. However, the way sir said that the religion is not saying this thing, the way madam said that the legislation is there, the thing which we talked earlier, the society has to change its attitude, and in which you rightly pointed out, not only female but also we need to teach our daughters as well that is your right. The way we were talking earlier about the ombudsperson things and so many things, even in the high class, in the educated class, they don't have any clue what their rights are.
That's so true.
Seriously.
And a lot of times we see, Ms. Sam, that educated women, they are also discouraged from putting forward their cases, putting forward their pleas. But before that, sir, I would want you to comment on this, because I do understand that widows, they've also been given special importance in the religion as well. So when we talk about protecting their rights, more particularly of widows in Islam, what is the Islamic stance on the same?
Firstly, you see, this is an area which was looked at by Rasulullah and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala 1400 years ago. Because you see the orphans, including the orphans, we talk about widows, like the next comes the orphans.
Right.
Right? And the widows, they're vulnerable. Right? They have no support many a times.
True.
So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam many a times is very strict in his sayings. Like he said, the best house is the one who nurtures an orphan. Right? So we from the study of the hadith and the Quran, we come to know that if there's any part of the society, any part of the family who's vulnerable, as a member of the family, as a member of the society, we should move forward and support them.
Right.
So you see, this is how, because first is within your family circle, then many families together. So this is
then
how the change is going to happen.
Right. That's very rightly put by yourself, sir, because in this regard, then of course we also need to see other categories. For example, perhaps widows who might not have children, they might be more disadvantaged as opposed to those who do have children. On which I'll come to you, Ms. Maliha, and I would want you to add to this. So when we do talk about this, more particularly from that societal conception, which still does does exist in the Pakistani society. We often come across this belief that women perhaps they aren't that interested, or they wouldn't want to, ideally claim their property rights. But as a practicing lawyer yourself in Pakistan, how do you see these trends changing over a period of time? Because we do understand the fact that women now, they are more empowered, they are more educated, and they are more vocal with regards to pursuing their property cases, as perhaps was the case maybe a decade ago. So how would you view this?
Women demanding access and control of their property form one of the largest percentage of legal aid and advice cases I have come across, whether as an individual lawyer or working with civil society organizations or running a legal aid helpline. So women are very much interested in making sure they get access and control over their property. This includes whether it is maintenance, dowry articles, the haq meher or dower, or whether this is inheritance property or even property that they have bought themselves. So there's a misconception where we are told that socially women don't want access to the rights, which is completely incorrect. Now, women have two options of fighting for their rights. One is to go to the criminal route, where they have to prove that the other person intentionally and maliciously defrauded them or deprived them of inheriting their property or stole it from them. Or they go the civil route, where they have to prove that they themselves are in fact the owners of the property. Now, when the majority of cases of deprivation or maliciousness are either family members or people close to the family, there's a reluctance to go towards criminal courts and then therefore going through a criminal trial, which leaves you with primarily looking at civil cases, which can take years and decades to come to a resolution. And that is a massive issue that women do face. So in many cases, they will mediate, or they will, get a way out of it or settle out of court, which is therefore a misuse and lack of effective implementation of law, which is a massive problem that we do have. However, I strongly believe that in cases which may be civil in nature or relating to family law, where the court finds that a husband or a family member has intentionally or maliciously tried to deprive a woman or defrauded a woman, they themselves should be able to pursue a criminal case against the accused who has done this illegal act. That is the only way that we can put in some sort of detriment to people who are perpetuating this constant movement of depriving women of their property. Further, we need to put in effective alternative mechanisms such as the ombudspersons, but give them enough powers to actually get the property back and place it back into the hands of the women.
Right, Maliha, your point is noted. I would want you to respond to that, because I think she's raised some very valid points to which you would perhaps want to respond. So when we do talk about the Ombudsperson's office ability to ensure that is a right execution, rather expeditious execution of their orders, how empowered is the office to do just that?
Legally, it is very empowered because the federal ombudsman or the provincial ombudsman have direct access to the deputy commissioner. And even through SHO. I mean, under the law, both the things can be easily implemented to get the rights to the women. I would like to add a little bit more angle to it. We are talking about the ownerships or the possession. When we talk about the possession, there is one more activity, and that is that entitlement to an ownership.
Right.
You see, one is ownership and the other is that I should be entitled to it. Now, that's a very vast subject, and recently, women have started to become aware, and a case has been filed in the Islamabad office where the woman who has been divorced did not leave the premises. House is equally her entitlement because she was a working woman and her husband was a working, and she said that my money was also put into it, so I'm entitled to the property. And that's a very interesting aspect which was recently not known to the Pakistani women, and the women over here have started to get into it. Let's see the result, what comes at the end.
Right.
But that's something really very interesting.
Right. But when we do talk about perhaps the social pressures or the challenges that the office perhaps might face, so how would you then explain those to be? Because a lot of times we also understand the fact that women might come across people who might be extremely influential, they might be very strong and fluent as well, and after they have actually put forward their case to the office or to the court for that matter as well, they might be pressurized to take it back. So how does the office then tackle issues like these?
We have to realize that the Ombudsman office is actually quasi-judicial. So it has the government machinery at the back. The best or interesting part is that, you know, the executive, the DCs, they also fall under the domain. Then she's, or the Ombudsman person is empowered to directly ask the SHO to implement it. So I think it's pretty effective. Doesn't look like that, but I think so there are very success stories over here.
Right, and the office of course should be given credit for this as well. And then again, I feel at the end of the day, the litigant themselves, they need to be very empowered this way too. This again goes back to something which Ms. Sam was earlier saying, that I think here the support system of that particular woman, the family she belongs to, that also kind of becomes very relevant here. Sir, coming towards you, I think a very important question which we must of course talk about, taking benefit of your presence here on the show today, is the fact that in a lot of cases we also see women might be deprived of their right of inheritance just because the sons, they have been given the entire inheritance state, and this is just done so as to deprive them of their due inheritance share. So when it comes to the Islamic stance on such situations, how would you explain that to?
Ms. Fatima, number one, on this topic, you see, when you study the Quran, you'll see the Quran many a times give principles. In this case, Quran has set standard, right? 1400 years ago, doing all those fractions. So 1 by 3 will go to the will, and then how much in that case will go to a son or a mother or so forth. So all that detail is there, number one. The one aspect which is many a times people ignore, at the end of these verses, Allah says that I am all hearing and all knowing.
Right.
So if you're trying to be extra smart and you get hold of a piece of a land or asset or wherever, for some period of time, remember Allah is seeing and is being recorded in your deeds.
Right.
Right. So for how long you will get advantage out of it?
True. And sir, the very core of our religion is also about being fair, about being just. So I think this again kind of contradicts the very essence of the religion per se as well.
Very nicely said. You see, the religion, there's one factor which we see in courts as well. There, see, when there is a dispute, the one party is not agreeing with the other. Whereas in our religion, it goes one step back. Where you start, you don't start with unfair behavior.
True.
That's the first thing which all of them are informed.
Right.
So what is your fair share? Number one, Allah and His Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has defined it. So one thing, so whenever you start, you see that's the principle being a Muslim, is that whenever any activity that you start, you see what Allah and what Rasulullah has said.
Right.
Right. So therefore the fairness is the first thing, first principle that needs to be carried out.
True.
So what happens now is because people are ignoring the commandments of Allah, and they're just focusing on this, the worldly gain of this world, which they are looking, which may not be with them for more than 50 years.
And it's something very arbitrary and very short term. That's very rightly put by yourself, sir. And madam, since you have also been a former judge, we do also understand the fact that we've also had Supreme Court rulings on issues like these too. Moreover, on the very issue of women willingly giving up their inheritance shares as well, where the Supreme Court has struck down such, actions, saying that this is contrary to public policy and the Sharia as well. So how would you comment on that? I'm sure you must have come across so many cases in the course of your being, a district and session judge yourself.
Fatma, truly speaking, it's more of a social norm that the women give it. You have to understand why do they give it. I've actually, as a lawyer, as a judge, I've seen the pressures of the, family, the brothers, the fathers, that you shouldn't get married, otherwise leave the inheritance.
True.
You know, there's one aspect to it. Secondly, they say, oh, you don't need it, your husband is working, so give it to your brother or something like that. These are not the Sharia aspect. We must realize, and everybody should realize who is a Muslim, that very few laws are ordained of Allah.
True.
Inheritance is really directly ordained of Allah. The shares have been exactly determined.
Right.
And so we can't cut that out.
Right.
We can't say the woman has given in, you know, and well, the Supreme Apex Court keep on, you know, changing, develop it accordingly. But I think so, this is one law you cannot give in.
Right,
you cannot
madam.
say, okay, my brother is so sweet, he takes care of me, so the property is in his hand.
And even where we have seen cases, I'm sure you must have also come across this in your practice as well, that where the court has accepted this argument, they've gone actually leaps and bounds to actually confirm the fact that yes, you know, the evidence is such that it supports that claim.
True.
So it is something which is not fictitious or frivolous on the face of it too.
True.
On which I'll come to you, Ms. Sam, and I think in this regard we must also of course talk about the important initiatives that the Pakistani government has taken, not only to generally empower Pakistani women but also in ways more than one to uphold their property rights. Now in this regard we understand the fact that not only the NCHR but also the PCSW has, you know, a helpline in place where people can very you know, easily call and get due guidance with regards to their property rights. In addition to that, we also understand the fact recently Maryam Ki Dastak app has been launched in a groundbreaking initiative by the Honorable Chief Minister Maryam Nawaz Sahiba, and basically this innovative mobile application aims to enhance public service delivery by bringing essential government services directly to the doorstep of Punjab residents. And this of course includes provision of essential documents like the birth and the death certificate, the marriage and the divorce certificates, amongst you know, quite a few other certificates. So do you not feel that at a very core level, by giving women you know, easy access to such important documentation, they are also in a way kind of, you know, improving or facilitating their access to the justice system? How would you view this?
Fatma, what I want to say that this is the practice in our country, that we always try to blame at times government, at times people, and at times the societal things, and the way we are also discussing that this is right, this is wrong. The thing is that every department is working, every department, whether we have religious scholars, whether we have judicial system or we have the government system, we are doing well. Look at the other countries, they are also facing the same problem, but they don't want to give the bad narrative of their country. I feel at times sorry, because we are doing great things, our women are doing great things. Look at our Chief Minister, and from the day one, she just spoke in the Parliament, and at which is the largest I guess place where you can talk about the legislation and the implementation.
Of course, our vision is very pro-women.
Yeah, right. So we need to, and I was the part of the harassment app as well, and the way she said that that is the red line which nobody can cross, that if a woman will call me and I will hear there is something is happening, at least we should start appreciating these things. That's how we can give the positive narrative of your country.
Right.
And another thing which I want to point out very rightly, that this PCSW and these all departments, they are working. This process is slow because we are the country.
And also, madam, the women crisis shelter centers, a lot of people don't even know about them, but the government is also providing, you know, free shelter, free pro bono legal aid services, and so many other services that too under one roof. People need to be made aware about these services.
In previous governments, there were the huge facility of loans as well. So they were in Balochistan, they are giving the kind of shelters you were discussing about.
Even in Punjab, madam.
Yeah, but like I'm just giving the example of Balochistan because we always think that that's the war zone. It's not.
It's not, right.
So people are doing great things, and I really appreciate this government initiative. And when I was looking at the international community, when I was part of that, they were looking at us in such a awe, because your CTO is a woman, your CM is woman, your the half of the things, the important different portfolios they're handling by women, like our judiciary is doing great things, as scholars are there. We are the only one who are thinking with that gaslighting perspective that we are feeling sad and we are being threatened by men.
That needs to change, and here again you see the Pakistani media that has an extremely important and pivotal role to play. Why should we not then actually highlight and put forward success stories of empowered women as opposed to just portraying them, you know, as damsels in distress?
Yeah, and there I want to point out again another thing, that there was a saying, when there is a good movie which is being flopped, there could be 100 reasons, but when the bad movie is going to be in the box office that is depicting the society mindset. So the thing is that our men are not doing anything like, you know, they are killing you, you are going out and they are going and throwing acids on you. One out of the 1,000 incident that is happening in every country.
I think again you see then the narrative itself that needs to change, the media perspective that needs to change, and I think women, they also need to find that courage so as to be able to come forward and talk about their achievements, on which I'll come to you, Maliha, and I would want you to add to this. So when we do talk about overall the challenges, the barriers that women do face with regards to either accessing land or for that matter even exercising control once they do have it, how would you then bifurcate these challenges to be, whether these challenges then of course stem from our social biases or for that matter they are more structural in their nature?
The main issue about why women do not get control or access to their property is the patriarchal mindset of Pakistan. We are told and taught since childhood that women do not have the capacity or the capability to manage anything such as property. For example, we are told that how can she get her property papers? She has to go from department to department. She's going to get pushed around a lot. It's going to be very hard for her. How is she going to be able to manage to deal with tenants or with landlords or with taxes or with plumbers, or if we're talking about land? How will she deal with the marketplace if it is agriculture, etc.? It's better that you leave it in the hands of the man, who is the one who can better handle this. And that really changes and creates these power dynamics where men are all the power holders and the women remain vulnerable. We need to create a demand amongst women to challenge and break this status quo. We need to make them realize that not only do they have this right, but they have the legal backing and they have their own internal capacity and capability to be able to not just access but control, work and actually manage their entire property. And therefore, they should not be as scared or feeling vulnerable or feeling disempowered from doing so. At the same time, we need to work with the men to tell them and train them and make them change their views about the fact that it is necessary for women to have this kind of power. It is necessary for them to be able to exercise this kind of power in order to build our nation and be a happier family, as well as support 50% of the population of Pakistan. At the same time, we need to work with the government to make sure they are providing easily accessible and transparent and correct information for the women about where they need to go if they need to get their property, who do they need to approach for the correct documentation and direction. The ombudspersons, for example, should have the complete right to be able to not just give a decision in the woman's favor, but have enough power to be able to get that property out from the person who has taken it illegally and then hand it over to the woman whose property it belongs to. And that is the kind of change we need to make to rectify the situation.
Right, Ms. Maliha, your point is noted. On which I'll come to you, Sam, and moving towards the end of the show, we do understand the fact that you've had a lot of international exposure to, and you have had that benefit of attending COP28 and then of course a lot of conferences with regards to UN women too.
Yeah.
So overall, when it comes to, you know, taking away the best lessons, that too of course keeping in mind that reformatory approach, what are the things that Pakistan as a nation needs to work upon so as to facilitate women's property ownership in the country?
I guess we need to give them more awareness sessions, because the way everybody is saying that everything is available, women themselves, they don't know what their rights are.
True.
Women themselves, they don't want to excel in different or in a various fields. Women themselves think that my brother is better than me. Women themselves think that my son should get more property as compared to my daughter. So this is the high time where everything is in your favor. We need to understand that we are capable of this thing. We need that kind of confidence. We need need that kind of success stories. Like if a woman is in a real estate, we need to appreciate
That's
it,
so true.
rather appreciating those women who are not doing anything.
And not only that, madam, we need to educate them about the importance of actually dealing with real estate. A lot of times we see that women might be very reluctant to do that just because they don't have the requisite financial literacy skills, or they perhaps do not have those negotiation skills so as to negotiate with agents too. So there you see, then again we need to perhaps invest in having greater women estate agents, and just break through those taboos which actually hinder women's access to either owning property or dealing with property transactions.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what UN Women, when you talk about in the COP28 and now COP29 is coming up. So the major thing was, which we were discussing about climate justice with the women empowerment, and how the way you said earlier and the way we were discussing, whenever Sir also said this thing, whenever there is a calamity or whenever there is a chaos, the most affected part is women or kids or minorities. That is in our religion, it says like women and kids first, and then rest of the thing. So we need to understand our own importance in our own mind, and then we can tell another person that how we can do it. So my international exposure says that we are living and we are a blessed nation. We are a blessed people. Our counterparts are good. The only thing which government, there should be a kind of a collaboration in between the government and the corporate sector. There should be a kind of a bridges where we can execute those things. If a government is creating like this Mariam ki Dastak, if it is giving a one window operation, that all chambers, all stakeholders, all financial stakeholders, all even C-level people, they should get it connected. If we will keep on working in silence, then we will never be able to do it. I need to share things with you.
But in addition to that, you would also appreciate the fact we do have not one, rather quite a few SDGs, under which the Pakistani state is obligated to comply with. For example, the SDG 5 that very clearly talks about gender equality, and then there are SDG 1, SDG 2, SDG 4, SDG 10, all of which directly or indirectly actually relate to women's property rights and women empowerment generally. Coming towards you, and my last question to you would be, so when we do talk about empowering and educating women, we all understand the fact the media has a very important role to play in this regard, and this is something which earlier Ms. Sam also said. But when it comes to empowering the rural woman out there, how particularly do you feel can we reach out to them? Because we do understand the fact they perhaps might not even be literate enough, or they might not have that access to digital services too. So how then can we educate such women so as to come forward and claim their property rights?
Fatma, this is a very it's a tricky question, how to reach to the rural women. Digital, yes, it has to be. We have that facility. You can file a complaint directly online, and you can also visit the office and submit.
You do have regional offices which would facilitate access.
Exactly. Then we do have seminars. We are trying to outreach people, because this is something we are understanding. The cases are few because people are not aware. The women are not aware. And yes, most of them either have got some mail to tell them that this is your right to reach out.
Right, madam, your point is noted. On which, sir, I'll come to you, and my last question to you would be that when we do talk about the very important role of religious scholars, how do you feel can people like yourself mobilize your power, your influence, so as to educate the Pakistani community at large about the true Islamic perspective on the right of women not only to own property but also to inherit it as well?
Well, the Imams have done a great job as well, as Ms. Sam was talking about, and the awareness of dowry, for example, the mahar, right? Go back in 60s and 50s and see how the practices are now, right? And so that's one. So the improvements are going there. They're talking about it, and they do talk about it. But one thing I've seen and I've observed, that many a times some quarters of power, they many a time dictate the imams, right? It's rather should be collaborative. You explained, this, like for example polio. eradication of polio, Imam played a very important role in that.
Of course. Even during the COVID-19 vaccine time, we remember that religious scholars went to media channels so as to actually explain, you know, why it was safe to get these vaccinations. And even in Bangladesh, I remember that there was this very successful family planning program in which imams, they mobilized their power so as to actually educate people about the importance of the same too.
Oh yes. So like these collaborations are there. So, you know, honor them, that's something. And then, yes, we do talk about status of the woman, right? So this is something which is not only, you know, being discussed, and the inheritance, for example, this is also being discussed in the Friday sermons, and many of the imams emphasize on that. You see, again, it's about fairness.
Right.
Right. And this is where if we start our processes with that, what my Allah is saying to me,
True.
what my Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying, you know, if that's the beginning, you know, many of the ills which we have in our society will be eradicated, inshallah.
Inshallah, basically. But it has to be a very continuous and a very dedicated effort. I think somewhere down the lane, perhaps it has come in breaks, unfortunately. It has to be very focused that way so as to be able to carry through. Coming towards you, Ms. Maliha, and before we conclude today's show, so what would your proposals for reform be when it comes to overall improving, you know, women's access to the justice system? Because a lot of times we also understand the fact that women do want to access the justice system, but, you know, the entire process in itself, that might be very tedious, very long and very difficult for them. So as a lawyer in your own right, what are the reforms that you would then suggest so as to make this entire process not only more accessible, but at a very basic level more affordable for the Pakistani women out there too?
There are three main issues in our society which have a direct impact on women's ownership of property. And this is all based in patriarchal elements and mindset which are perpetuated in Pakistani society. First of all, even though everyone knows that legally and even religiously women have every right to own property, there is a societal idea or mindset that says that women are not capable of handling that property. And therefore, men should be the ones handling it, because how will the women go out from department to department to get the paperwork? How will they handle the rent? How will they be able to manage all the maintenance that is required around property? How will they be able to handle the marketplace and the economy and the world? Because over the decades and years of Pakistan, and even before that, let's be honest, within the culture of South Asia, women have constantly been told, you cannot do this. You should not do this. So it's a two-way street where women believe they cannot and men believe that they are the only ones who can. And that is the mindset we need to target and change through mass gender sensitization, through mass mindset change. We need to create the demand amongst women and make them realize that they are more than capable in handling property and that they should be doing this. At the same time, men need to be trained and taught that women do have this capacity and that they should have this capacity, and it makes our nation stronger and it makes our community stronger. We need to break that patriarchal mindset. At the same time, along with all of this community work, we need to work with the government system to make processes of paperwork easier, processes of getting property documentations easier, and the know-how and the knowledge for people to be able to find easily, whether online or whether through one phone call. This is something that must be done if we want to make justice swifter, and we want to make sure that women actually have control over their property and have the law properly and easily implemented.
Right, your point is noted. On which note I would like to conclude today's show. Thank you so much, Ms. Sam. Thank you so much, Ms. Uzma. Thank you so much, Waqar Saab. And thank you so much, Ms. Maliha, for your time today. Well, to conclude today's show, we generally spoke about property rights, more particularly women's property rights in the Pakistani society. Whereas, of course, we do appreciate the fact that this is that one area which then does require legal reform. What we cannot ignore is also the fact that it has extremely important social and cultural dimensions to it too. If we want to, empower the Pakistani women, and in this regard we need to educate them, we also need to sensitize Pakistani men about the importance of granting women, equal access to property ownership, both in marriages as well as in households. We need to, as a Pakistani society, appreciate and understand this very simple fact that, empowering women is equals to empowering the society at large. Thank you for watching The Society. Until next time, take care and Allah Hafiz.